Welcome to Planet Poetry, the podcast for poets and poetry lovers. My name is Peter Kenny.
And I'm Robin Houghton. In each episode, we interview a poet and ask them to share some of their work. So in today's episode, we're meeting Niall Campbell, who's going to be talking about his book, The Island in the Sound.
And in our festive edition, we'll discuss George Safaris, a new book from Kay Syrad, and hear a poem by Matt Riches.
We're also going to be, I'm going to be reciting a classic Christmas poem. Also, as it's Christmas, for your delight and entertainment, we have our traditional blooper tape.
Surely we make no mistakes. Anyway, before all that, let's hear what Niall Campbell had to say to us.
Niall Campbell is a poet from the Outer Hebrides of Scotland. His latest collection, The Island in the Sound, was published in September of 2024 by Blood Axe Books. He works as a librettist and is the editor of the acclaimed poetry journal Poetry London. He lives in Fife. Niall Campbell, welcome to Planet Poetry.
Lovely to be here.
I'm here with Peter as well.
Hello.
I think the first thing you should tell us is, where are you in the world?
So, after many years travelling around, we've settled down in a village in Fife, so somewhere between St Andrews and Dundee.
Okay, so you've done a lot of travelling around. I think some of that is reflected in the book that we're going to talk about today, but it's The Island in the Sound, and with a title like that, I think, with all the different meanings of the word sound, silence as well, and maybe the particularities of island life. But it's not really a themed book exactly, is it? More of a collection around a number of themes. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think there's. I'm a bit uncomfortable with the idea of themed collections. I don't think it particularly suits my work. I mean, the predominant images and ideas might be linked to the Outer Hebrides where I grew up, but I think I would see it rather as a means of using those things to tackle other larger ideas rather than it being specifically about the Outer Hebrides.
I wonder if you could get us into the book perhaps by reading the poem, which comes very early in the book, Apprenticeship.
Of course, a small introduction. The kind of thought behind this poem was really along the lines of how we often talk about the first love that we have impacting all later loves. You know, first love, it kind of casts a long shadow. But I think there's something about the first jobs you might have had as well. And I'm conscious that it's probably not a job that many of the listeners will have done, but my first job was a crab sorter. I was brought up in a fishing village, and there was a weekly market, and a good way to earn money was, as a 12-year-old, to sit at the corner of a very large box and sort large from small crabs, and do that late into the night. And so I thought, I wonder how this impacted the kind of writing self later on. So this is Apprenticeship. Dusk on the water. The job was to watch, unracked, the wet, still dripping creels being tipped into the grading tray, alive with life. Our seas provided black-eyed velvet crabs, with small horns ridging their top plates. The work, to grade by size. Those big as a fist, they pointed, big as a heart, I saw, were lifted out as worth a better price. Ours you would weigh by hand and eye, and a slow part of the mind. Young jeweller at a tray of breathing stones, arbiter at the filling, refilling box. The night progressing until the shed light drew out thick moths. To work was to find yourself drawn in, or was it drawn back, to something careful and mysterious, hard-shelled and resistant, big as a fist or heart. The same rain falls on that shed and on this house. I did it 5 years, and then I did it for the rest of my life.
That's such a gorgeous poem. One of the personal reasons I love this book so much is that I also grew up on an island in Guernsey and went out in fishing boats and lifted spider crabs out of pots and so on. For me, the poem quite quickly becomes metaphorical. You know, you've got a tray of breathing stones. It's almost like your origin story as a writer. You know, we're peering over your shoulder as you're sorting these crabs.
Yes, that last line, I did it 5 years and I did it the rest of my life.
Yeah. What is it about that early period of your life spent on that island of South Uist? Clearly that's made you very distinct as a writer. How would you describe that?
It's difficult, especially at this moment. I mean, I'm, let's call it early 40s, and I've been off the island now for longer than I was brought up on the island. Heaney was such a touchstone for me. Interestingly, I was hearing something along the lines of how Heaney is a very popular poet in China. And the reason for it is the Chinese population, there's a huge number that have been leaving the farms and moving to cities. And so his poetry does speak to them on that level. It's about the past, what they grew up with, but retaining some of that into this new life. So in a certain extent, I would follow that line. I mean, for me, the imaginative landscape is set young. You know, no matter how long I would live in any other part of the world, it was always, if you asked me to close my eyes and imagine a scene or a landscape, it's probably going to be the Outer Hebrides. It's just, that's how it is.
What writers spoke to you? You mentioned Heaney, and I certainly get gleams of Heaney in here. There is a rich host of other writers that you nod to as you go through this book. Who was your earliest pin-ups in terms of poets?
A difficult one. I mean, so I went to university to study history. With the Scottish system, you got to fill your columns, you got to do extra subjects. And so I did, drifted into literature. And then when I went on to do the honours side of things, I wanted to know what was going on as early as I could. So I ended up doing Renaissance studies, sort of 1550 to then Shakespeare, then Restoration, then Romanticism, then Victorian. And so I think there's something nicely fitting that my poetry education stopped about 1920. You know, I didn't really get modernism at all. So there's a bit of an underpinning on that side of things. There was something exciting about reading Ben Jonson, you know, a poem to his dead child or Restoration Place. So there's a side of that was the early enthusiasm. But then in terms of the contemporary, it was the Scottish poets, you know, and I think that probably bears out quite a lot in my writing as well, that I was just really drawn to. I think being in my 20s when there was such a rich number of Scottish poets in their like 40s and 50s, be it, you know, obviously people I'm very close to now, you know, Don Pattison, Kathleen Jamie, John Glenday, Robin Robertson, John Burnside, you know, had a sort of mindset that's particularly Celtic, you know, so the Northern Irish and the Scottish writers were particularly important growing up. And with this book, there's been a few American writers that I've looked at. Somebody called Deborah Diggins, I thought was wonderful. I've come across her recently, and when I fall hard. So I found her poetry books, and then I found her memoirs. So yeah, it's the usual mix of the old inspirations and then a few new ones.
Well, I think we need to move on to our next poem. We'd like you to read Tongues of Water, please.
Tongues of Water. We went each Sunday for the Mass, recited in my parents' language that wasn't mine. The Gaelic gospel that was just sound, pure sound to me. I rose and kneeled and listened as my people traded vowel for vowel, my whole small world, this flowing water. Back then, I sat and heard the ocean in their unknowable call, that same unknowable response. My parents stood in the Psalms current, like waders gone out, as I settled knee-deep on a second bank, hearing only the sound of a stream, believing only the sound the stream makes.
Thank you. It's It's so lovely the way this language that was incomprehensible to you is flowing over you. It made me think like I know Catholics who will go to Latin Mass still because they like the idea that they can't actually join. There's no joining in anyway, but they can just sort of listen to it. Clearly, this was something else that shaped your sensitivity to sonic effect, to the flow of language.
I think that's absolutely. I had a really nice conversation with the poet Karen Solly once. It bears out exactly what you're saying. So she had the similar experience of being taken to Latin masses when she was growing up, but didn't know a word of Latin. So both of us, for an hour each week, were just surrounded by sounds that we didn't have a meaning for. And so it was just patterns. I don't know if you know one of the things that Ezra Pound advocated for the making of a poet was to be surrounded by Hebridean folk songs as long as you didn't know Gaelic.
Really?
Oh,
Yeah, 1911, I think it's an essay from about 1911. And it's just this idea of being surrounded by sound and patterns and to be sensitive to the effect that patterns can have. But it's not to say it's the only way to be a poet, because I'm one of 6 children, and the other 5 definitely are not poetic.
So, in fact, it wasn't a negative experience. The fact that you didn't sort of feel alienated from this language, it's kind of seeped into you in a positive way.
Yeah, absolutely. I only look back on it with fondness because it's complicated thoughts about the islands. I mean, Gaelic, the role that it played when I was growing up, it was very much the language of the farm, the fishing, which was not the language of the future. So it was not exactly encouraged. However, now Gaelic is in many ways the language of the middle class, especially in the cities, if you go to Glasgow, for example. So it's a complicated thing to think then you are creating a disconnection. All these children, the island worth of children, where maybe 5 or 10% would be able to understand exactly what was going on, and yet you persisted in the Gaelic Mass for tradition's sake. But there was that break. You've just got all these children there that don't really understand what is really happening, or what are you trying to say to them?
these words are obviously so loaded with meaning, just kind of being received only on a kind of sound level. Just being Freudian for a moment, was it weird that, your parents spoke an entire language which you probably only had sort of edges and corners of?
If you want to go real Freudian, it's probably more strange that so there was 5 sons. It was myself and my 4 brothers, and my sister came along last, and she was taught Gaelic because it was a private language between her and my father and my mother.
God.
So it was unusual. But again, it could have been just a change in the mood music, because I was about 11 years older than my sister. So a lot of things had changed in that decade. But, Gaelic maybe being a bit more appreciated, especially up in Lewis and Harris, the rise of BBC Alba, the Gaelic TV channel, Gaelic radio being a little bit more. So maybe they started to see a little bit more in terms of opportunities, and it wasn't a dead end, but far from it.
Oh, fascinating.
One of the themes I feel comes through sometimes in the poems is a sense of being out of place or being in an unexpected place, things sort of being displaced or misplaced almost. And one of the poems where we get that, I think, is They Have Crept Down.
So this, we do have plenty of deer on the US, but this is actually, so in the little village I live in at the moment in Fife, there's a forest at the edge of it with deer. And so every now and again, you will see them, like that sense of the closest thing we can get to the mythical, I think, in this locale, just unusual presences that will flit in. And to see them come down closer to the village was this idea. So you've got the forest, and then you start to enter the terrain of streetlights, tarmac, cars. And so this was kind of where this poem came from, this meeting, and yeah, perhaps a sense of seeing myself as this an equally strangely misplaced creature. They have crept down. They have crept down, so out of place, to graze the street's black field. Vague silhouettes in the burnt streetlights, still noticeably furred, brown and delicate, their eyes still large. They move acclimatized to the lifting tut of their hooves on tarred road. Once, coming home late in November, I turned a corner to see a deer resting on the wet bed of the pavement. It was ghostly, but shared all the sad wonder of a thing being where it shouldn't. I saw a drowned book on the beach, or a pile of discarded clothes unreadable in the snow. The rowan scatters berries throughout the forest a mile from our home. The firs hang the fog from their branches. Strange meetings. The wild deer and myself. We stopped on this cold road that led past Grace. They licked the moisture from the parked car's headlights.
I love that last image of the deer sort of licking the headlights. It sort of brings that world of man and the wildness kind of literally touching and almost feeding one another.
Ingmar Bergman, the Swedish director, had a thing of saying, look, I'm not trying to make it real, I'm trying to make it alive. And it was just that sense of how do you capture something of this deer? And it sort of needed to be an action of what it might be doing. And I just thought there would be something. I think there's a sadness to the image, but also one of just, I don't know, going about its business as well, to lick the headlights.
Perhaps it's kind of a statement of the blindingly obvious, but you do use lots and lots of natural imagery in brilliant ways. You never get the feeling that you're just indulging a kind of urge to describe the world in beautiful words. What's this natural imagery helping you express?
I think it's difficult because sometimes you're being led by the poem as well as to what the poem wants to express as well, like not to dodge it slightly, but I think I'm just trying to feel into the poem. I'll talk to younger writers about this. Something feels true, like it happened in real life, and something feels true as it happened because the poem wanted it to happen. And there's a weird relationship to those sorts of things where you can open up maybe more unusual actions or unusual ideas because it's what the poem wanted to be true. You know, to go back to relying on the nice phrases of other people, I always liked the line by Zadie Smith when she was saying, look, why am I writing? I write to stop myself sleepwalking through my life. You know, and there is a real sense, especially with my second book, Nocturary, about raising my son when he was a newborn. You know, I had no time for writing at all. I was exhausted, you know, like anybody else who's a newish parent. But why did I want to write? What was the kind of compulsion that I was trying to capture? Was this sense of wanting to stop, to linger and pause and to kind of work some things through. And so that's always been the impulse with the poems, is this sense of, right, what am I trying to work through?
I just love that idea of the poem somehow having its own volition and wanting to do its own thing.
Oh no, I 100% believe that. As soon as you start guiding the poem, you know, you've got to just be quiet a lot of the time at the desk and just think, right, especially in the redraft, because a lot of people are excited by the first draft. The first draft is this moment of creating something out of nothing. But I think there's just much more discovery to be had in the redraft, the second, the third, the fourth, where you're now listening to the poem and where the poem wants to go.
Great answer. Fascinating.
That all sounds rather magical in a brilliant way. We'd like you to read one of your island sonnets, please, Eriskay.
Island Sonnets, Eriskay. Today, in the field's breath, I found where night sleeps through the daylight. The spade cut through furtive, rooted inkiness until a wettish stalk was removed and laid out. We dug beneath bog cotton and days butterwort, revealing past the sundew and wild moss into something richly fragrant. Discovery is an action of the heart, and we went deep or so I remember it now on the night walk, as every breath brings back broken top ground, mud hands, the aliveness of the moving body, the aliveness of the ear pressed to the earth, hearing the buried lateness just stirred awake, the smell of smoke's hour before any candles lit.
Thank you. There's something very tactile about this. I love the details of putting your ear to the ground and hearing and feeling the aliveness of the earth. It just felt really kind of chocolatey.
I think this poem had another title that might have referenced a bit more the kind of the peat side of things, which somebody steered me off saying, look, Heaney's done peat. Heaney's done peat cutting. You can't go there again. So it turned a little bit into something else. But it was just more to I love in poetry where, I kind of explain it. I'd like almost to read with my hands as much as my eyes. I like the sense of being able to draw my hands over a line and feel the different textures to it. That the writing is not smooth and clean as if it might be on the page, but that it does have some sort of different contours or facets to it. One of the nicest things I wrote about this in a little Substack was when I was starting out writing, I went on one of these Arlon courses.
Oh, yeah.
One of the tutors was Robert Minhinnick, and I'd shown him some poems, and I think he was being very kind. They weren't great poems or anything along those lines, but he said, what I like about the poems, good or bad, and I think by which he meant bad, there's always a grit in the wash. And there's this phrase, do you know where the grit in the wash phrase comes from? Like in Victorian times, when you were hand washing clothes, you would put grit and gravel into it. So by its friction, it would wash better, like
Oh,
stubborn mud stains and things like that. But it's just a sense of two things working against each other, that little bit of grit hidden amongst the water. And I just thought, yeah, actually, that was right at the start of my writing career, before any pamphlets or any books. But it just exactly that. That's what I want to capture.
That's brilliant.
so this is one of a number of island sonnets in the book, isn't it?
Mm.
But there were a couple that didn't seem to be about the islands of the Outer Hebrides. One referencing a Greek island, and another one, which is Island Sonnets, the poem, which I was very intrigued by, kind of an Ars Poetica moment. So this is one we'd like you to tell us about and read for us.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of the usual story, I think, a little bit with poetry, where I had an idea and maybe wrote about Fujai, which is I think was second or third poem, and Lingai, so kind of unpopulated islands. But then I started looking a bit more into the different ones. So, but there's Sandy Isle as well of one of the poems, which was I found appeared on a lot of maps until at some point somebody went to the island. I think it's off Australia somewhere, and somebody went and realized it's not there at all. So there was an island on maps for 100 or so years that wasn't there, it didn't exist. And so I thought a poem about that would be interesting. But this one, just a little bit of an interrogation of the island as a poem, or the poem as the island. Island Sonnets, the poem. The island of the poem finds its map, rising inked as a solitary cliff, sheet white, as if from the earliest, purest seams of chalk. Along footholes born in the rock, the sad bird meaning calls from its nest beyond decipherment. On its wind-swept meadow, the vowel of the stone wall meets the vowel of the burdock, and they dance. First of the heart's landfalls, last sanctuary of voles and spittlewheat, place, as in childhood, where the music of the wind whistles at the window of the one house. Landing here, even once, is to find yourself shaken into being, or so we imagine.
That's so kind of. It's one of those poems that it's hard to unpick immediately. There's that sense of when you say landing here even once is to find yourself shaken into being, or so we imagine. It reminds me of some kind of Zen koan where you're saying, right, I'm shaken into being, and then simultaneously, or so we imagine. So it's kind of undercutting things, and you're left with that sense of a meaningful contradiction that you kind of puzzle over at the end of the poem.
I think that goes back exactly to the sense of what was true for the poem.
Yeah.
I think I had the line of, to land here even once, yeah, shaken into being. But then I was immediately feeling, but I don't know if you could land here. So there was a sense the impulse for as a writer was to say, what happens if you did make footfall on this land? And in the poem, kind of wanted to refute that, as if to say, as if you would ever reach such a place. Like whatever poet you might be. Again, the weird tension that's part of the poem, but maybe even just part of the writing process as well.
I wonder how you fit writing into your just day-to-day life. How does that work for you?
It's been more complicated. So since I took over from Poetry London as the editor there, I'm writing a lot less poetry. I was warned at the start that this would probably happen. And the reason I was given was you're going to have so many other voices in your head, because you're reading so many other poems. We get ridiculous amount. You wouldn't believe it, about 30,000 poems per year. We accept about 100. So it's, as I explained to people, my job is really to reject 29,900 poems. It's not to accept 100. It's the other side. But I don't think it is actually all the different voices. It's being surrounded by finished things. You're looking and reading all day, well, not all day, every day for a period each day, finish things all the time. And so it makes the first draft much more complicated because initially you've got to be at ease with the first draft. It's not finished, it's an idea, it's something you're getting down. But I found that side of things more complicated. I've actually received some money from Creative Scotland for the first time, which is nice. But this is to write a novel instead. And I actually think writing a novel while being a poetry editor might be more doable than writing a lot of poems. So the idea that from January is I will every morning not open my emails until noon or 1 p.m., but have that morning, every morning, to the book.
It's making me think of Muriel Spark, how she was a poetry editor and also writing novels at the same time.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think there's something fits much more neatly together, however you want to see it, as the work as an editor, and then poetry as the art or the craft. I think to maybe shift genres even just slightly might be quite useful.
Right, we're forcing you on to another poem now, which is On the Bone Oracles.
On the Bone Oracles. Shoulder bone was best for it, flat and long, bound with her neck's flex, whisper distance to the plough strap, with knowledge of the field pool and weight. And cut clean out, both pale and even as an open book. You wrote the future onto it. Such a dream, writing onto calcium, the bones carved free dust blown away softly by the close-by mouth. The act, to see inside the mind of heaven, as though it were a room with a peephole and God were there talking to himself. Sometimes when we write, we should think of this.
Disturbing the surface. I love this idea of the flat shoulder bone and then writing into it, carving into it. The act to see inside the mind of heaven. Although it's evoking these traditional methods and this slow patience, there's also this a glimpse of God. It's got a spirituality to it as well, and also oracle, divining the future. So sometimes when we write, we should think of this. So does this idea of divination come into your own writing practice, or tell us a bit more?
I just wanted to test myself a little bit because I think a lot of the time I do maybe root the poem too firmly in rooted things. In many ways, I'm a standard islander, again, even after all these years of being quite muted, quite pragmatic. And I just thought, well, there is a different side of the poem, again, for centuries, for thousands of years, that is this sense that it was larger than just trying to capture a moment or to make something beautiful. It was this act of engagement with the beyond. And I just thought, well, maybe as much as anything, the last bit of advice, sometimes we should remember this. It's probably just to myself as much as to anyone else, the sense of going, right, don't settle too much into an idea of what a poem is, especially for yourself, because I think that's a danger. This is third book territory, and you want to just keep things shaken up a little bit, because I think the danger is always that you fall into a way of writing and a way of perceiving what the poem's function is, And I just wanted to say, a reminder to myself as much as to anybody else, there's other things at work here. It would be useful to acknowledge that.
Hmm.
A lot of writing, especially in poetry, is looking back or trying to encapsulate moments that have happened. But what's nice about this is you're talking about when we write, we should think of this. So you're almost writing about something that's in the future.
It's curious when you put things like a manuscript together, because invariably you're going to have more poems than you place in. And this is one that I don't think I ever published in a magazine, but when it came to compiling the manuscript, for exactly that reason, I wanted it, because there's a lot of poems that deal with the real and the perceivable. And I just think as a collection, in the same way in a poem, you want just that odd note of something completely different. So it's kind of hints towards that.
Well, I think the next poem we want you to read, if you will, is another of the island sonnets, The Shadow, which I think perhaps speaks a bit to what you've just been saying. It's mysterious and it's something a bit different, and it's looking both at the past and the future.
Island Sonnets, The Shadow. Back home, brought in to see his body, we saw his shadow lying next to him, stretched out, his own dark sentry sleeping, at last allowed to sleep, since the full ruin already slept the town. It took his profile in the 9-watt glow of the bedside lighting and copied him, brother and own dark twin. Maybe I see too much of love in everything. But with the candles flaring in the room, we stood alone but saw his shadow grieving, flinging itself down on the road of the bed, laying out, private, quiet, loving. It would miss him like itself, the still black coal beside the coal, now ash pale from its burning.
I find it hard to tell you how much I love this poem. So many thoughts that come out of it. Maybe I see too much of love in everything. It's sort of, there's a tenderness that, even in the first poem you read us, you're showing the velvet crabs, that sense of love that is coming through this and finding it such a strange circumstance. But this twinning of the dead body and the shadow, brother and own dark twin, and the poem ends with the contrast between the blackness of the unburnt coal and the ashy spent coal. And it's like the unburnt coal is the thing full of potential and still to burst into flame and to live in a way. There's a mysterious dark fuel that's powering through this collection. And, what is it? Or is it sort of ineffable?
To touch on the loving, first of all, we're talking about redrafting earlier. I mean, the thing that I tend to redraft into a poem is that sense of openness, and that potential to say that I might love something or might love someone. So it's difficult. The poems are tend to be kind of wrought out of it. In terms of the darkness, a lot of it comes from this particular situation. So my mum was one of nine children, and my dad was one of nine children. And so, I would constantly tell my wife, oh, this happened with this uncle or aunt. And she'd just think, why did things always happen to your family like this? And it's just odds. We've got so many in our family that the odds of something strange happening. But this was a very complicated person who passed away. And I remember thinking, meeting him a lot of times when I was younger and just thinking, what is this person doing with their life? Just a bit of a wreck of a person. But there's just a sad detail recently where I found out that when he passed away, before he knew he was dying, and he paid the priest before he died to come and exorcise his house after he died.
Wow.
And I was thinking, it's one thing to exorcise somebody else's ghost or to move that presence from a house, if you believe in such things. But it's another thing completely to say, please remove any trace of me, bodily, spirit, anything else. But it speaks to such an amount of sadness that we can't even touch on. And so we're just trying to, with this poem, get a sense of the nature of this person that I completely didn't understand, but something else, that could a part of me understand, love for this person, and could I try and kind of pick up on something, even in its own, the idea of being loved by your own shadow, and the shadow being the one to grieve you most. I don't know. I just thought it would be an interesting and maybe poignant thing to investigate.
I just absolutely love it. It's kind of, for me, the poetry that really excites me is stuff that feels magical, and that there's so many poems in this collection that have that kind of magicality about it. I mean, magical sounds like people would frown if you're writing some kind of academic essay, but when I'm in the presence of that kind of magic, I just I doff my cap. It's absolutely spellbinding.
Oh, no, you're very kind. Thank you.
It's a super book, and we've only touched on a few of the poems. Obviously, there's never time, is there, in these interviews to go through an entire book, but we were both really moved by it. And sorry you didn't get the Forward Prize, but,
These things happen. I mean, it's nice to be shortlisted. You want some acknowledgement for the book because it is just so many years of work.
Yeah.
It can happen quite rarely. I've not really written a poem in about a year or so, and I'm to be honest, even just talking about these poems, I'm going, where on earth did these things come from? I have no idea. Even just this, especially this last poem, The Shadow. When the act of creating a poem feels now so distant. I was a student of Don Patterson's in St Andrews back in 2008, and I think it was his book Rain, maybe, that was up for the forwards at that time. I think he must have won it because I remember saying congratulations. The class was saying congratulations to him, and he was like, another person wrote that book. I don't know who it was. I put it down as being a kind of, again, a dour Scotsman, but I 100% see that. Like, again, reading some of these poems, thinking, who wrote this? Because I have no idea.
It's a nice feeling, though, to pick up a poem that you've written, a long time ago and read it and think, that's not bad.
Yeah. Do you know, it's strange because when you first put out a book as well, there's this sense of, right, which are the poems that you read when you do a reading?
Yeah.
And I've fallen into such a terrible habit of just reading probably the same 5 poems again and again and again. And so a lot of these poems, I was almost engaging with them afresh in a way. So it was really interesting. Thank you for the selection. It was really enjoyable to read, but also to discuss too.
Oh, and we often get told that guests who come on here, they say, oh, I've never been asked to read that one before. And so you think, well, that's good then. It makes it enjoyable, hopefully, for you as well. Well, I think all that's left to say is Niall Campbell, and I've said your name correctly now because you've educated us on how to say your name.
I've got friends who've known me for decades who just still call me Niall. And I go with it, be it Neil or Niall, but preferably Niall. I'm grand.
Well, thank you so much for your time, and we've really appreciated having you on the podcast, and all the best for
Been brilliant.
for everything.
Yeah.
No, please. It genuinely really delightful to discuss these things with you both. And thanks for the enthusiasm around the book as well. It genuinely, it does mean a lot.
Pleasure.
Yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So I absolutely loved Niall's poetry, and I thought he was a lovely bloke as well.
Yeah.
There's a constant familiarity for me. You know, I think partly because of his growing up on an island, there is an unusualness of being on a small island that it kind of shapes your mind, really. And when he was talking about, you know, if you closed your eyes, the sort of land, and asked to imagine a landscape, that, you know, he'd probably think of South Uist.
Yeah. Do you feel that then from your Guernsey background? You weren't sort of there your entire childhood, or
mostly I was kind of between London and Guernsey, and you know, most of it in London, but exactly the same thing. The landscapes of Guernsey are always there for me. It's my imaginative landscape. I somehow really identified with him, and the sort of magicalness of his language I just absolutely loved. And that attachment to nature, but nature metamorphosing into, you know, other concerns, like the working as a teenage crab sorter, the crabs becoming precious jewels and things that he's sorting. And I said it was like a poet's origin story.
Yes.
And even though he's lived away from the island for decades, like I have with Guernsey, it still kind of haunts me. His poetry spoke to me, and so I thought it was amazing.
He was quite careful to say, wasn't he, that he grew up on the island, but he has moved around a lot, and that using, if you like, the island and the landscape and the wildlife in his poetry was not necessarily, you know, about those things. It was using all of that to explore other topics, and I like the way he returns in many of the poems to his life as a poet and what shaped it and what continues to shape it. There are so many levels to it. It's an enjoyable book to read again.
Oh, definitely, yeah. We've had a lot of guests that have talked about the poem's got to go its own way, but I think the way that Niall was talking about it, a poem being true to life and then what's true for the poem being slightly different things, I thought was really compelling.
Yes, in the second draft, he said it's the second draft when things start to, you have to step away almost. It's not a new idea, as you say, one hears this in workshops, but actually the way he expressed it was different. I felt quite attentive to that idea.
Yeah.
Yes, it was interesting, wasn't it, how he talked about the last poem that he read, the shadow.
Yeah.
And this person that he wanted to honour it in a way, the dark twin, the shadow that is next to this person who's dead. It's very moving.
Yeah, wanting to even erase spiritual traces of yourself.
Yeah,
you know, that's a very odd thing, I think, about the potency of black coal. It's still unused, and then next to it is an ashy coal that's been burnt up. This black shadow remains somehow. I think the poem's doing what it wants in there, but it's absolutely beguiling and just incredibly imaginative. There's talk of exorcisms. The house that my grandmother lived in was exorcised as well, so...
Was it?
Yeah, she had it exorcised on more than one occasion. And I certainly, as a kid, thought it was haunted.
Didn't do any good then if she had to have them around several times.
Yeah, 2 if not 3 times. It was all terribly bizarre and kind of hushed up. Little poem that we didn't ask him to read, which is called What is the Poem? It says, what is the poem? Just the soul singing in its box. And if there is no soul, then it's just the box singing, bearing out its emptiness. There is a kind of gothic darkness to some of these poems.
Yes. Just the box singing. I think I've written a few poems like that. Yep, he was an excellent guest to have on. And the book, just to remind us, is called The Island in the Sound, published by Bloodaxe. It was shortlisted for the forward. I didn't quite make it, but...
It's my prize winner, that's for sure.
So this is Christmas, Peter, and what have you done?
Another
year over.
No, over. Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, well, it's
almost over.
It's lovely to be back, isn't it?
We've been taking it easy on the podcast since the summer, haven't we?
We've been trying to explore our own lives a bit.
We have, and various things, exciting stuff has been happening on the home front, on the publishing front.
Well, my main thing is that there's a new member of the family, my little grandson Enzo, who's now...
Yeah, he's Italian, isn't he?
He's a quarter Italian, yes. Vincenzo, his name is.
Is he speaking the Italian yet?
He's not really saying very much, although mostly through the medium of smiling and chuckling, so it's just
good.
Unbelievably endearing.
He's not sort of refused to eat cheese and fish together in the same meal or anything like that?
Not so far, having not been a father, how this unlikely business of becoming grandfather, how much I'm loving it, and kind of... how that little boy has sort of wormed his way into the whole family's heart so easily. No, it's great.
How lovely.
How about you, Robin? When we last spoke on this podcast, you'd launched the Mayday Diaries into the world.
Oh, yes.
And you've been doing that, and there's something else. Another poetry torpedo launched into the sea. Tell us about
I just thought, Mayday Diaries, it's great, I'm doing some readings, it's nice. But, of course, one always gets a bit itchy when a book's out there. It's like, well, what's next? And then I've had this idea of doing another homemade pamphlet for a while. Do you remember there was that one footwear a few years ago? And I love that process of printing the pages and then trimming them and stitching it all together and creating this little A6 size amuse-bouche of a pamphlet. So I got stuck into another one.
Yeah, such a lovely format.
And it's called Yo-Yo.
Great name for a little... a bundle of poems.
The picture on the front is of a sort of, what do you call those? A macaron biscuit, a pink macaron on a string. So it looks a bit like a yo-yo. So that's the idea. So, and that seems to have done quite well. I promoted it completely shamelessly to my mailing list. And so that's that. I did 50 copies, all numbered, all handmade and numbered, and they all went. So I'm on a second edition now. The bounce back edition.
Oh wow!
is now in the world. So, and there's actually 2 bonus poems in it as well from the first one.
It's a lovely object to have. It's made for the reader in a way that, just publishing something isn't somehow.
And I've got stickers on the back that say written by a human. I thought I'd just milk that one as well. But I've been doing plenty of reading as well.
Yeah.
I wanted to give a shout out to Matt Riches, actually, who's a great supporter of the pod. Yeah, so Matt has got this blog called Wear the Fox Hat. And he's got this pamphlet, actually it's a couple of years old, I think, Collecting the Data. And I heard him reading from it recently. And it's a fine pamphlet published by Red Squirrel Press. And it's a nice size. I like to talk about what it feels and looks like. Nice black end papers. Because it's called Collecting the Data, and I think that's partly a nod to his work, a market researcher. And he works in TV. And there are a few poems in here about his dad. There's one of those I thought I might read. The title of it is actually Riches, which is funny, isn't it? I mean, that's his name. Riches. It looked like a sort of wedge that would choke a Shire horse to death. 2 grand in bundles of 50s, their waists pinched by red rubber bands. You asked me to count the lot, then drove away to meet a man who knew a man, and came back late in a lime green Ford Cortina. I thought we were made of money when you let me sit in your lap and we reverse parked it, my feet pressing on your feet in the dark.
Oh, that's great.
It's a really nice vignette, isn't it?
It's nice to hear a poem about a father that isn't kind of riddled with doubts.
It's obviously a fond memory. And also on my reading list, of course, is The Odd Magazine. Yeah, I heard recently, very sadly, that Prole magazine has closed.
Yes, I heard that too. They were such a sort of figure on the landscape of poetry, weren't they, for a long time?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I was trying to work out how long they've been going. I think it's got to be 20 years or so.
Wow, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yes, published out of Wales. Brett Evans is the poetry editor. Phil Vernon handled the prose side of it. And it was a good journal, a small journal, but they didn't make a fuss. They held an annual competition, and so they really put a lot into it. And one thing that I think was very different about them was that they had this profit share scheme. So if you were published in the magazine, at the end of the season, when they sort of looked at the books to see, you know, what sales they'd done, whatever profit they made, they divided it between the contributors. So it would be things like, you know, you've got 89p coming your way or something. I mean, I always just said, oh, just, you know, obviously keep it, you know. I thought the principle of it was absolutely morally sound. That's what I suppose what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, so, it must have been exhausting running anything for 20 years. I mean, you think of Jeremy Page at Frogmore that's been doing it for decades. We did 5 years and then needed a little lie down for a while, didn't we?
That's right, with the smelling salts, yeah. So... Anyway, so farewell, Prole.
Yeah, and a well-earned rest for Brett.
Yeah, he's going to do his own writing now, I think. So that's me, really. I'd like to know what you've got to report, though, Peter, because I know you've been beavering away.
A game of two halves, really. I just wrote more than I've written for a long time, and I was really happy with what I'd written. And then I got to a point where the whole idea of poetry gave me the ick. I couldn't, just thinking about poetry, I didn't want to ever look at another poem. My brain was just craving something that was different. The main thing that sticks out was I read this Jung's a sort of autobiography called Memories, Dreams, Reflections. And I'd been writing recently lots of stuff about the earliest memories that are of childhood. And one of the things I took from Jung's book was that he thought those kind of earliest memories were very important. So it kind of validated the fact that I've been spending so much time on it. But there was a chapter about his relationship with Freud just made me howl with laughter. They sort of weirded each other out. So every time Freud came to meet him or they encountered each other, Freud would faint. The idea was that Freud felt that Jung was somehow trying to replace him and kind of do harm to him. And Jung says in this book that he had lots of sort of murder fantasies about Freud. They started off being quite comradely, and in the end, their weird neuroses got out of control and they were unable to speak to each other. Yeah, it's a fascinating book. It's all about his kind of inner life, and the story of his inner development and his thinking and feeling about things is much more important than the things that happen to him. And the other thing I'd like to mention is Kay Syrad's book, Yellow Noonday.
Yes, you went to her launch, didn't you?
Yes, it was in a very
I wasn't able to get
small room on the edge of Brighton. It was hosing down with rain outside. I often find this, I don't know if you do, with books that you end up really liking. When you first read them, you think, what was that? I thought it seems very delicate and beautiful, but I just can't get a handle on it.
But something made you read it again.
Yeah. And then, sort of reading it again, I just think, wowza, these are incredible. For me, Kay's book is kind of phenomenological.
What is that? What is phenomenological?
Well, it's... take the moon, for example. A phenomena is something that you can describe about it. So, one of its phenomena is its colour. Another would be its crescent shape or its full shape. So the phenomena is the appearances of things. The moon can look completely different. We know it's the moon, but its appearance is constantly shifting and changing. And in a way, Kay's poetry is like she's really noticing all the different shapes and the colours and things that present themselves, often in flowers and so on. But in a way, it's making me feel like she's paying so much attention to it that it's almost like she's seeing into something that's beyond that. She's glimpsing the moon behind it, as it were.
Didn't Kay get very much into moss?
Yeah.
I think she had a collection that was all about moss.
Yeah, her last one.
Which is that kind of focusing minute detail.
Yeah, you sort of get the feeling with these that you're sometimes looking down, a microscope. And the poems kind of call back to each other quite subtly as well in the collection. Slightly kaleidoscopic. Every kind of reflection is slightly different and changed. So it's an immensely subtle, interesting book.
You're going to give us a flavour of it?
One poem, "It was windy all day," chosen fairly at random, but I particularly like this one. "It was windy all day, with the leaves turning over silver and flashes of sun and rain lighting and wetting the orchid, the honeysuckle, the blackberry blossom, or a strand of pinkish field grass. She was gathering violets, irises, far away from long away, her tapering ankles. They did or did not see or hear her voice above the crickets. You can also imagine the colour inside birds, apples, worms, because this might help bear the lacunae in the heart, which is red as the red clover, and the purple small reed, and the velvet bent, and the joint leaf rush, cleaving to red altogether in the yellow-red noonday." Yeah, terribly mysterious.
Love all those colours.
The sort of strange detail of her tapering ankles.
Yes, and you can see the insides of worms or something, wasn't there, in there as well?
Like a cubist painting almost, when you're seeing all sides of one thing at the same time.
Chopped up.
Yeah.
Yeah. You say the title and the publisher again,
it's
please.
Yellow Noonday by K. Syrad, Cinnamon Press.
Ah,
I like their little byline, "Small miracles from distinctive voices."
I did want to mention another podcast that's come on the
A
scene.
rival, Robin.
I think more frenemies, I think.
The colleagues.
Rebecca Leake. She is a poet and she's had a lot of radio experience, I think. Certainly her voice is very Radio 4. I was a bit envious when I listened to her presenting her poddy. Made us look like a right pair of scarecrows, in the radio voice stakes. But Rebecca Leake, lovely, she reached out to me because she wanted to read one of my poems from the Mayday Diaries on her podcast, which is, of course, lovely and extremely flattering. And so I was really keen to have a listen. And what she does is she puts out a new episode every week. Every week, Peter. Wow. But it's short. So she shares 5 or 6 poems each week that she's enjoyed or recently discovered.
Does she read them all herself?
And she reads them all herself, and she does lovely introductions, and there's always a kind of a theme or as a thread, and so she weaves them together. It's really nicely put together, and I think it's gathering a pace. It's called The Ditty Bag.
The Ditty Bag.
The Ditty Bag, yes. So there's a bit of a double meaning there. Apparently a ditty bag is something to do with sailing, I think, because she's into that. So it is a thing, but also it's a little bag of ditties. But they're not ditties, they're proper grown-up poems on this poddy. It's definitely worth a listen. So have a look where you get your podcasts, like Planet Poetry. Have a little listen to The Ditty Bag. Rebecca Leake, with a rather gorgeous voice, listeners. Yes.
I just looked up Ditty Bag. It's a receptacle for odds and ends, especially one used by sailors or fishermen.
There we are. I knew it was something to do with boats. Because the poem she wanted to read of mine was about knots and making rope. So that kind of tied in with that theme.
Now we're talking about sailors and fishermen and their ditty bags.
Yes.
I zoomed off for a very late holiday with Mrs. Kenny to a Greek island. As I always do when I'm in Greece, I take some Greek poetry in translation to read with me just to make me feel like I'm there. And this year I took my collected poems by George Seferis. I was reading the section called Myth Historiema. Easy for me to say. It was a very famous sequence when it came out. It's kind of like a modernist odyssey. And what Seferis and other Greek poets do is plunder their beautiful, rich history and then use it to describe the sort of uneasiness of the 20th century situation they found themselves in. So it's kind of modernist poetry, but it's Seferis, for example, is much sparer.
And kind of rooted in the classics or rooted in classical civilization.
You're always sort of catching ruins out of the corner of your eye and so on, and mythology is quite present. But anyway, I thought I'd read one which is called Argonauts, and that's the sailors on board the ship bringing Odysseus home. So, yeah, picture yourself in Greece. on a terrace, looking at a thundercloud coming towards you. And a soul, if it is to know itself, must look into its own soul, the stranger and enemy. We've seen him in the mirror. They were good, the companions. They didn't complain about the work or the thirst or the frost. They had the bearing of trees and waves that accept the wind and the rain, accept the night and the sun, without changing in the midst of change. They were fine. Whole days they sweated at the oars with lowered eyes, breathing in rhythm, and their blood reddened a submissive skin. Sometimes they sang with lowered eyes, as we were passing the deserted island with the Barbary figs to the west beyond the cape of the dogs that bark. If it is to know itself, they said, it must look into its own soul, they said, and the oars struck the sea's gold in the sunset. We went past many capes, many islands, the sea leading to another sea, gulls and seals. Sometimes disconsolate women wept, lamenting their lost children, and others, frantic, sought Alexander the Great and glories buried in the depths of Asia. We moored on shores full of night scents, the birds singing with the waters that left on the hands the memory of a great happiness. But the voyages did not end. Their souls became one with the oars and the oarlocks, with the solemn face of the prow, with the rudder's wake, with the water that shattered their image. The companions died one by one with lowered eyes. Their oars marked the place where they sleep on the shore. No one remembers them. Justice. Beautifully translated by Edmund Keeley and Philip Sherrard. It's the complete poems, which is now from Carcanet Classics. Yeah, I had this friend Timothy Gallagher who died of AIDS, and he was the one that turned me on to Sir Ferris, and that poem particularly resonated with him, especially the last line. No one remembers them. Justice.
Justice.
He saw lots of people around him dying, and he knew he was going to die. So it's kind of bleak, a journey without end until they died.
It's bleak, but actually in the poem it's quite beautiful. It's like they sort of become one with the landscape, and they become part of the beach, they become part of the water.
The Argonauts were, when they died, buried on a shore, and they just stuck their oar into the sand to mark where they left.
You know what happens at Christmas on Planet Poetry, Peter? It's your favourite thing.
Yeah.
The bloopers. Well, I wonder how many bloopers we've got this year.
It's a triptych, isn't it, I think?
No, it's four panels.
Oh, is that four? What do you call
4
one
panels.
of those? Yeah.
I don't know. A quad.
So this poem, La Belle Dame Sans Merci, if that's
You're
how
sure
you
that's how
pronounce
it's
it.
pronounced?
No, I have no idea.
If it's proper French, isn't it?
La Belle Dame.
As in La Belle Dame Sans Merci.
Yeah.
I think.
La Belle
Or do you think
Dame-
it's?
Well, I thought it was sort of anglicised.
Is it Englishified?
Yeah.
Fine. Oh, do it. Oh, do it that way then.
This is the poem La Belle Dame Sans or Sans Merci. Oh, okay. Oh no.
Cryptic. A cryptic.
Quidditch. Yeah.
A quid. Oh no, let's stop there. Welcome. What's Wacom?
This week we meet Ellen Cranich and hear poems from her new collection, Crystal, from Bloodaxe.
It's not really this week, is it? It's this episode.
I always do that. In this episode, we meet Ellen Cranich and hear poems from her new collection, Crystal.
Take 3.
And this week...
Not this week.
So, I think all remains to be... Oh, God, I sound so drunk, don't I?
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's all that bullshit.
No, I think...
Times are becoming festive and I'm searching for the other bits of my Santa suit. Robin, you're going to supply us with something festive.
I am. It's my current little party piece. A favourite poem from my childhood. I've got a lovely little book illustrated of this poem. It's often called The Night Before Christmas. I think the official title is A Visit from St. Nicholas.
Oh.
It's allegedly by Clement Clarke Moore, American gentleman of the 19th century. But there was some controversy because another person, a Major Henry Livingston Jr.,
Right.
claimed that he had in fact written it and that Moore shoved it in an anthology without, and then claimed it was his own.
Well, it's bold-faced plagiarism.
Oh, unbelievable, isn't it? From two, very respectable gentlemen. But apparently the argument raged and the current feeling is that it was by Clement Clarke Moore. So I'll give you a quick rendition of that, shall I?
Yes, please.
A visit from St. Nicholas. 'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. And Mamma in her kerchief, and I in my cap, had just settled down for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new-fallen snow gave a lustre of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes did appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with the little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet an obstacle, mount to the sky, so up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with the sleigh full of toys, and St. Nicholas too. And then, in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a pedlar just opening his sack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry, his cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry, his droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke, it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowlful of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him, in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. but I heard him exclaim ere he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night."
Oh, marvellous. I always like in these things how they gloss the business of Santa coming down the chimney. You know, he just came down with a leap and that was done with it, you know.
With a bound. And he was chubby, he was a chubby old elf, and somehow he went down just like that.
Oh, that's quite
lovely.
All the names of the reindeer are in there as well, which is really
excellent.
Yeah.
Can you remember them? As I test people on that, remember the names of the reindeer.
No, I've used it to my advantage when Santaing, though, talking to children. And
oh, yes.
One time I went into a class and said, "My reindeer, Doris and Bob," and just made up all these kind of names, and the howl of rage and indignation from the children. Well, I feel all festive now.
Oh, good. Yes, I can hear jingle bells ringing in the background or something. There's something going on.
We will be back somewhere between the new year and spring.
And in the meantime, there will be 1 or 2 archive episodes, won't there? So we're not leaving you completely bereft.
Disinterred from the great crypt of Planet Poetry's archive.
Yes. So it's a happy Christmas from me.
And a ho, ho, ho from me.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Deck the halls with boughs of holly. 'Tis the season to be jolly.